It was Diane's birthday dinner, and something felt off the moment I walked into the kitchen. My mother-in-law, Diane, smiled at me as she handed over a glass. "A special cocktail for my favorite son-in-law," she said, her voice sweet, almost too sweet. "My name is Julian Mercer. I'm 32 years old, an independent photographer from Asheville, North Carolina. I've built my career from nothing. Weddings, wildlife, magazine spreads, and I'm proud of my work. But to Diane and her husband, Gerald, I was never enough. Family dinners were always the same. Diane fussed over her daughter Haley, while Gerald interrogated me with thinly veiled disdain. "How's the little photography hobby, Julian?" he'd ask, not even trying to hide his contempt. I smiled politely and took the drink from Diane, thanking her. But something about the way her eyes darted around, the subtle tremor in her hand, it screamed danger. Quietly, I swapped my glass with Gerald's. After all, he had spent years criticizing my career, measuring my worth by numbers and titles, and tonight I wasn't about to let her scheme succeed. As I sat down, my heart pounded. Something wasn't right. I could feel it in the air. That special cocktail wasn't meant for celebration. It was meant to manipulate, and I knew, deep down, that this night would change everything. Haley and I met 6 years ago at an art exhibition where my work was being featured. She was finishing her master's in environmental science, and I was just beginning to make a name for myself as a photographer. We connected instantly. She understood my need to capture the world through a lens, and I admired her passion for protecting it. But her parents were another story. Gerald, her father, made it clear from day one that he expected someone different for his daughter. A man with a stable job, a retirement plan, a company car, someone just like him. Diane, her mother, was subtler. She'd praise my photos, but it was always paired with a reminder that I needed something more secure. Over the years, I tried to win them over. I brought fine wine to dinners, showed them published work, mentioned high-profile clients. Nothing changed. In their eyes, I was just a temporary phase in Haley's life, a creative experiment she'd soon outgrow. I learned to smile through their thinly veiled judgments. I shook Gerald's hand firmly at every visit, complimented Diane's cooking, and kept my frustrations to myself, all for Haley. But there were signs I should have taken more seriously. The way Diane would subtly exclude me from family photos. The way Gerald suggested therapy for Haley's impulsive decisions while staring directly at me. And now, as Diane handed me that suspicious glass, all those warnings clicked into place. The tiny tremor in her hand, the darting eyes, the smile that didn't reach her eyes. It wasn't just paranoia. Something was very, very wrong. I tucked the thought away, forced a calm smile, and sat back at the table. Because tonight, I wasn't just a guest. I was on high alert. Dinner began like every other Sunday at Diane and Gerald's house. Polite conversation, forced smiles, and the constant undercurrent of judgment. Gerald bragged about his latest deal, Diane fussed over the table settings, and Haley squeezed my hand under the table, a silent apology for her parents' behavior. After the main course, Diane disappeared into the kitchen and returned with her special sangria. That's when I saw it. 2 glasses, separate from the others. As I approached, she added something from a small vial into one of them. It was colorless, odorless, subtle, but I knew enough to recognize danger. "Oh, Julian, this one's for you," she said, placing the glass in front of me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I forced my own smile. "Let me help you carry these," I said, picking up both glasses and moving toward the dining table. Gerald barely looked up from his phone. That's when I made my move, discreetly swapping my glass with his. He had always criticized me, belittled my work, and now, without a word, he was about to drink the very cocktail intended for me. I sat back, pretending to sip mine while nursing my beer, heart pounding. Every instinct screamed that I had to stay calm, to appear unaware, but inside I was tense. One wrong move, and this could spiral out of control. 45 minutes later, Gerald's face had drained of color. He rushed to the bathroom, sweat beading on his forehead, the violent sounds of his illness echoing through the house. Diane froze, realizing what had happened, her eyes meeting mine for a fleeting second. That glance said it all. She had tried to poison me, and now she knew I had caught on. I didn't confront her. I didn't react. I simply ate my dessert while Haley rushed to her father's side. In that chaotic moment, one thing became painfully clear. My mother-in-law's intentions had gone far beyond control. They had crossed a dangerous line. The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that Diane's attempt wasn't just a one-off lapse in judgment. It was calculated. I tucked the untouched glass into my bag, knowing it could be crucial evidence. Haley thought it had been a simple mistake or maybe food poisoning, but I knew better. By Monday, I had taken the glass to Jason, a former client who ran a small toxicology lab. I explained the situation carefully. "It's a family matter," I said. 3 days later, Jason called. "Julian, there are benzodiazepines in the drink. Not lethal, but enough to knock someone out for hours, maybe even cause memory loss." My suspicions were confirmed. Diane hadn't just been careless. She had deliberately tried to incapacitate me. I thanked Jason, asking for a written report, but I didn't tell Haley yet. She didn't need to know the full extent until I had more information. Over the next 2 weeks, I quietly dug into their history. Diane had multiple prescriptions for Xanax from different doctors, and there were rumors, odd behavior at parties, accusations of theft, strange incidents carefully buried by her family. Patterns emerged: manipulation, control, and a chilling willingness to interfere in the lives of anyone who didn't fit their vision. I compiled every scrap of evidence, prescriptions, toxicology reports, even whispered accounts from neighbors, and waited for the right moment. When Haley mentioned that her mother needed new photos for a social media profile, I knew the timing had come. That Saturday, I arrived at their house with my camera bag in one hand and a sealed envelope in the other. Diane greeted me, perfectly composed as always, unaware that her carefully constructed world was about to be exposed. "I thought you might want to see this," I said quietly, handing her the envelope. Inside were the toxicology report, prescription records, and other proof of her manipulation. Her hands trembled as she read. "This is absurd. I would never," she whispered, her voice faltering. "We both know what happened," I interrupted. "What I don't know is why." Her face hardened. "You're not good enough for my daughter. You never will be. A man should provide security, not pictures. And drugging your daughter's husband provides security." I stayed calm. "It wasn't going to hurt you. It was going to protect me and Haley." Her lips pressed into a thin line, and for the first time, I saw fear flicker behind her perfectly curated facade. That night, I realized something vital. This wasn't just about me. This was about control, manipulation, and a systematic effort to dominate Haley's life. And now, I had the evidence to fight back. With the envelope in hand, I didn't rush to show Haley just yet. I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof that would leave no room for denial. Over the next few days, I reached out to Vanessa, Owen's wife. She had confided in me before that Diane and Gerald had tried similar manipulations in their marriage. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because they did the same thing to me," Vanessa said quietly. "They tried to break us apart for 2 years." Owen worships his father. He believes everything Gerald says. I couldn't watch them do it to someone else. Her words confirmed the pattern I had feared. This was not an isolated incident. Diane and Gerald had spent years controlling everyone around them. And now Haley and I were in the middle of their scheme. I also reached out to Thomas, Haley's previous fiancé, and several of her old friends. Slowly, a disturbing pattern emerged. Anyone who encouraged Haley's independence had been systematically pushed away. Emails, conversations, and faded friendships all pointed to the same conclusion. Her parents had been shaping her life to fit their narrative, not hers. Once I had compiled everything, lab reports, prescription records, security footage, and testimonies, I created a single, organized drive. Every piece of evidence that proved their manipulation was there. Every email, every clip, every secret they thought was hidden. The time to act had come. I invited Owen and Vanessa over for dinner, without telling Haley, to show them everything. For the first time, I was no longer the silent target. I was in control. Over dessert, I connected my laptop to the TV. "There's something you both need to see," I said. For the next hour we watched, Diane tampering with the drink, Gerald's casual complicity, discussions plotting to undermine my career and my marriage, and evidence of the same manipulations against Vanessa and Owen. Owen shook his head, muttering under his breath, "That's not my parents." Haley sat motionless, pale, struggling to process the betrayal. I simply watched them react, knowing that the first step toward reclaiming our lives had begun. Haley didn't speak for the rest of the evening. Her face was pale, her hands fidgeting with the edge of her chair. Finally, after the evidence had been displayed, she turned to me, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she asked, tears brimming in her eyes. "I needed you to see for yourself," I replied softly, "not just what they did to me, but everything they've done over the years. I needed you to understand the full picture." The next day, Haley confronted her parents. I wasn't there, but when she returned home, her eyes were red from crying. "My father says it's all a misunderstanding," she murmured, sitting beside me on the couch. "He thinks I'm being influenced by you. He said you're insecure about your career." I nodded silently, expecting this response. Diane and Gerald had spent years shaping Haley's perception of the world. And now, even with evidence, they were trying to twist the narrative. For 2 weeks, Haley barely spoke to me. She visited her parents alone, returning with red-rimmed eyes and lingering doubt. I threw myself into work, spending long hours in my studio, waiting for the storm to pass. Then, a package arrived with no return address. Inside was a USB drive and a note. "You should see this." It was from Vanessa. The drive contained home security footage from Diane and Gerald's house. Time-stamped clips revealed Diane adding something to a drink the night of the dinner, and Gerald drinking from the swapped glass. More footage showed arguments between Diane and Gerald about me and conversations where they plotted to influence Haley's choices in relationships. Watching the footage, my hands shook. This wasn't just about the drink. It was a systematic effort to control Haley's life. And now, with undeniable proof, I knew it was time to confront them directly. The next day, I received a text from Gerald. "We should talk. Man to man, no wives. I agreed. That evening, I met him at his country club. He was waiting in a private room, a glass of bourbon in hand, attempting the same calm, confident demeanor he always wore. Julian, he began smoothly, families are complicated. My wife, she can be difficult, protective, but she means well. Drugging someone, that's just a misunderstanding. Diane takes medication for anxiety. She probably mixed up the glasses. I didn't flinch. I have the security footage, Gerald. I know exactly what happened. His confident mask cracked, hardening into something colder, more calculating. What do you want? Money? Is that what this is about? I always knew you married Haley for financial reasons. I want you both to leave us alone, I said simply. Stop trying to convince Haley I'm not good enough. Stop interfering in our marriage. He leaned forward, voice low, dangerous. You think this is the first time we've dealt with someone like you? People who want to take advantage of our family? Haley will come home where she belongs. She always does. Ask her about Thomas. Ask her about the fiancé before you. I felt a chill. Haley was engaged before she met me? Yes. Nice guy, but not the right one for her. Doctor. But we didn't like his background. Took us 6 months to convince her he was wrong for her. She broke it off. Came home crying to Daddy. History repeats. I nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of years of manipulation. Gerald smirked, thinking he had the upper hand. But I had the evidence, the plan, and Haley's trust. For the first time, I felt in control, not just defending myself, but protecting my wife from a lifetime of interference. I didn't confront Haley immediately. She needed time to process, and I needed the right moment to show her the full scope of her parents' interference. Over the next few days, I organized every piece of evidence: emails, old security footage, toxicology reports, and testimonies from friends and former partners. Everything pointed to a single truth. Diane and Gerald had been controlling Haley's life for years. I invited Owen and Vanessa over for dinner without telling Haley. She wasn't ready to hear it yet. As dessert arrived, I connected my laptop to the TV. There's something you both need to see, I said. The next hour, we watched in silence. Diane adding something to a drink, Gerald drinking from the swapped glass. Conversations plotting to manipulate my career. Discussions about controlling Haley's relationships and isolating anyone who encouraged her independence. Owen's face turned pale, muttering under his breath, "That's not my parents." Haley sat motionless, her hands trembling, her eyes wide as the layers of deception unraveled before her. For the first time, she saw the full picture. This wasn't about me alone. It was a systematic pattern of control. When the footage ended, Haley turned to me, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she whispered. "I needed you to see it for yourself," I replied gently. "Not just what they did to me, but what they've been doing to you all along." Her expression shifted from confusion to resolve. She understood now. The real battle wasn't just mine. It was about reclaiming her own life and independence. The following day, Haley called her parents. Her voice was firm, steady, and completely different from the hesitant tone I had grown used to over the years. "Mom, Dad, we need to talk," she said, putting them on speaker so I could listen as well. Diane's voice sounded cheerful, almost casual. "Darling, I was thinking you should come stay with us for a while. Your father and I are worried. Marriage is hard, and sometimes separation can give clarity." Haley cut her off sharply. "I've seen the videos, the security footage, the drink, the conversations. You've been manipulating me my entire life." There was a stunned silence on the other end. Gerald sputtered, trying to interject. "Whatever he's shown you has been manipulated. You know Julian has always been jealous of our family." Haley's voice didn't waver. "No, I've seen it all. You've been controlling who I date, who I trust, and trying to isolate me from anyone who encourages my independence. That stops now." Diane's voice dropped, no longer cheerful. "Haley, you can't possibly believe this. It's not true." "I believe it," Haley said firmly, "and I'm done letting you control my life. Julian and I make our own choices. You don't get to decide who I love or what I do." For the first time, I heard their hesitation, the cracks in the facade they'd maintained for decades. Haley had taken her power back. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was in control, and she was standing up to her parents, with me by her side. That evening, Haley, Owen, Vanessa, and I arrived at Diane and Gerald's house. The air was tense, but this time we were prepared. I brought my camera equipment, not to document casually, but to make it clear that every word, every gesture, and every reaction would be recorded if necessary. Gerald greeted us with his usual charm, trying to mask unease. Diane smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. I set up the tripod in the living room. "Family business?" Diane asked, suspiciously. "Exactly," I said, "and I am family. We're here to have an honest conversation." For the next 2 hours, we laid everything out. The drink, the manipulations, the ex-boyfriends, the emails, the footage. Every piece of evidence was presented. Gerald and Diane denied it, of course, calling me unstable or manipulative. But with each denial, I showed another clip, another email, another testimony. Their faces grew paler, their denials weaker. Finally, Haley stood. "I love you both," she said, tears streaming down her face. "But what you've done is unforgivable. You don't get to control my life anymore." Owen nodded in agreement. "We're adults. We choose our own partners, our own paths." Diane's eyes welled up, not with remorse, but with the realization that control had slipped from her grasp. Gerald looked stunned, unable to comprehend that his children were defying him. As we prepared to leave, I handed Gerald a USB drive containing all the evidence. "This is yours to keep," I said. "I'm not going to ruin your reputation by sharing this, but if you ever interfere again, copies will go to your entire social circle, business partners, and country club." For the first time, Gerald looked at me with something resembling respect. "I underestimated you," he admitted. "Yes," I said simply, "and that's why you won't ever understand your daughter." 6 months passed, and slowly, life settled into a rhythm we could control. Haley and Owen began therapy to work through the damage their parents had caused, giving themselves space to heal and reclaim their autonomy. Diane and Gerald kept their distance, sending only occasional texts, but respecting the boundaries we had established. There were no apologies, no attempts to manipulate, just cautious acknowledgement of the new limits. Over the holidays, Diane and Gerald extended an invitation for dinner. Haley hesitated, but after discussing it, we agreed to go, with conditions. We stayed at a hotel nearby, controlled our time with Eliza, and set the rules for interaction. When we arrived, everything appeared normal on the surface. Diane had prepared a lavish meal, and Gerald engaged in polite conversation about my photography projects. For the first time, it felt like they were behaving with genuine interest rather than trying to control or criticize. I noticed subtle shifts, hesitations, small gestures, a newfound respect lurking behind guarded expressions. We stayed for dinner, but I remained aware of the boundaries we had set. For the first time, I felt safe, not just physically, but emotionally, knowing we had drawn the lines and that they were finally being respected. That night, as Haley and I watched Eliza asleep in her crib, she whispered, "They'll never change, will they?" "No," I replied honestly, "but they'll have to accept that we can't be changed." It wasn't forgiveness or reconciliation. It was recognition. Recognition that our lives, our choices, and our family would no longer be pawns in someone else's game. Spring arrived, and with it, a new chapter. I opened my own gallery in downtown Asheville, a space filled with the images I had captured over the years, landscapes, portraits, and architectural shots, all on my terms. Haley stood beside me, Eliza in her arms, beaming with pride and love. My parents had flown in from Oregon, and friends, clients, and supporters filled the space, admiring the work I had built independently. Diane and Gerald came too. They stayed only briefly. Diane held Eliza carefully, under Haley's watchful eye, while Gerald nodded at my photographs with something approaching genuine approval. There were no unsolicited critiques, no attempts to control or lecture, just a quiet acknowledgement of boundaries and respect. As we locked up the gallery that evening, Haley asked softly, "Do you think they've changed?" I considered the question carefully. "No," I said finally, "but they've accepted they can't change us. Sometimes, that's enough." ... Later, on our porch, watching the stars emerge over the mountains with Eliza asleep upstairs, I realized something profound. I hadn't won by playing their game, by scheming or manipulating. I had won by refusing to play. I had stood my ground, protected my family, and built a life defined by my own terms of success, love, and integrity. And in that quiet, starry moment, I understood the most satisfying revenge of all: living well, honestly, and without compromise, with the family I loved most by my side. Months turned into years, and life continued on a path we had chosen for ourselves. Eliza grew surrounded by love, creativity, and the freedom to explore her own world. Haley and I watched her milestones with pride, knowing that the toxic influence of her parents no longer dictated her life. Diane and Gerald remained distant, occasionally sending polite messages or gifts, but their attempts at control were gone. They had learned, finally, that manipulation only works if the other party allows it, and we would never allow it again. Professionally, my gallery thrived. Clients respected the work I created on my own terms, and my reputation in Asheville and beyond grew organically. Recognition wasn't measured by approval from those who had tried to undermine me, but by the genuine appreciation of people who valued my vision and dedication. I often thought back to that night of the poison drink, the turning point that could have been a disaster. Instead, it became the catalyst for change, forcing boundaries, uncovering truths, and strengthening the bond between Haley and me. Sitting on our porch, watching the stars over the mountains, I realized something I hadn't fully understood before. True victory isn't about revenge or proving someone wrong. It's about building a life with integrity, standing by the people you love, and refusing to let anyone else dictate your story. And in that quiet, enduring peace, I knew we had truly won. Years later, as I flipped through photographs in my gallery office, I realized how far we had come. Each image told a story, not just of landscapes, wildlife, or weddings, but of perseverance, of standing firm when the world tried to bend us, of protecting what mattered most. Haley and I often talked about that fateful night, the moment everything shifted. It had been terrifying, infuriating, and heartbreaking, but it had also revealed the truth. It showed us the strength we had individually and together, the unshakable bond between us, and the family we were determined to build on our own terms. Eliza grew up with love, independence, and curiosity, never burdened by the manipulations of the past. And while Diane and Gerald remained part of our story, they were no longer central characters. Their power had faded because we refused to give it to them. Looking out over the mountains from our porch, I understood a deeper truth. Life doesn't just hand you victory. It's built in the choices you make, the boundaries you set, and the courage to protect your own. And in that knowledge, I felt a calm satisfaction. Not revenge, not bitterness, just the quiet triumph of living fully, honestly, and with those I love most by my side. Time passed, and with it came new beginnings. Our life was no longer defined by the shadows of manipulation or the expectations of others. Instead, it was defined by creativity, love, and choice, the things we had fought to protect. Eliza's laughter filled our home, a daily reminder of what truly mattered. Haley and I grew stronger as partners, our bond fortified by the trials we had overcome together. The lessons of the past, the lies, the schemes, the attempts to control had not broken us. They had sharpened our understanding of what a family should be. Professionally, I continued to follow my vision, expanding the gallery and taking on projects that challenged me and inspired me. Success was no longer a measure of approval from anyone else, but the satisfaction of doing work I loved and seeing its impact on others. Occasionally, Diane and Gerald reached out. Their messages were polite, restrained, careful. We responded respectfully, but kept our distance, honoring the boundaries we had fought so hard to establish. As I watched the sun set over the mountains one evening, Haley by my side and Eliza asleep upstairs, I reflected on our journey. We had endured betrayal, manipulation, and doubt, but we had emerged intact, stronger, and free. And in that quiet, glowing moment, I knew the best revenge isn't anger or punishment. It's building a life so full, so resilient, and so true to yourself that nothing and no one can shake it. We had won, not through schemes or retaliation, but through love, integrity, and the courage to define our own story. Years later, as I looked through old photographs in the gallery and watched Eliza explore the world with boundless curiosity, I realized how much we had built, not just a family, but a legacy of resilience. Every challenge, every confrontation with Diane and Gerald had shaped us into a family capable of standing firm against manipulation, protecting each other, and creating a life on our own terms. Haley and I often spoke about the past, not with bitterness, but with clarity. It reminded us how precious trust, honesty, and respect were, and how fiercely we needed to protect them. Our home was filled with laughter, creativity, and warmth, a stark contrast to the tension and control we had once endured. Professionally, my work continued to thrive. The gallery wasn't just a space for photographs. It was a testament to dedication, vision, and independence. Each exhibit reflected a life lived authentically, without compromise, without yielding to anyone else's agenda. Sometimes Diane and Gerald tried to reconnect, sending polite notes or holiday greetings. We responded with courtesy, but maintained our boundaries. We had learned that respect had to be earned, not demanded, and that our priority was our family, our values, and our happiness. Sitting on our porch with Haley, watching the stars over the mountains, and listening to Eliza's quiet breathing upstairs, I knew we had achieved something far greater than revenge. We had built a life defined by love, strength, and integrity. A life that no one could control or tarnish. And in that serene, enduring peace, I understood the ultimate truth. The most powerful victory is living fully, fearlessly, and authentically, surrounded by the people you love most. Life, as we now knew it, had come full circle. The tension, the deceit, and the manipulations of the past had faded, replaced by a family built on trust, love, and mutual respect. Haley, Eliza, and I were no longer defined by the shadows of Diane and Gerald's control. We were defined by the choices we made and the life we created together. Our home was filled with laughter, creativity, and peace. Eliza thrived in an environment of freedom and encouragement, exploring her world without fear or constraint. Haley and I grew stronger every day, not just as partners, but as guardians of a family whose foundation we had carefully built. Occasionally, Diane and Gerald reached out, but we responded with calm courtesy, never allowing old patterns to resurface. They had learned, perhaps too late, that we would no longer be manipulated or coerced. Boundaries were respected, and our family remained intact. Professionally, I continued to flourish. My gallery was more than a business. It was a testament to perseverance, vision, and integrity. Every photograph represented not just artistry, but the triumph of living life authentically, without compromise or fear. As I sat on the porch one quiet evening, watching the sunset with Haley beside me and Eliza playing nearby, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. The poison drink, the betrayals, the confrontations. They had tested us, but they had also forged our resilience, and I realized something vital. True victory isn't revenge. It isn't proving someone wrong or causing harm. True victory is living fully, fearlessly, and authentically, surrounded by the people you love most, and never allowing anyone to take that from you. In that moment, I understood. We had not only survived, we had thrived, and that was the most satisfying ending of all.